DVSA visits at transport operators. In this video, we will talk about what happens during those visits, how to prepare for them, what is likely to trigger DVSA visit, and what is the possible outcomes of the visits that may take place at your company operating center. So the form of the visit could be in person, where the DVSA officers come on site and inspect the documents and vehicles and your systems that you've got in place on site, or they may simply choose to send you a desk-based assessment report to complete and send them back with evidence that is listed in the form itself. So at the in-person visit, the officers are likely to ask to speak to the transport manager or the director, definitely the responsible person. Then they will want to ensure that they are at the right place, so they are likely to ask for the operator license documents, maybe company's house records, and after that they will want to dive into the compliance records at your company. Officers tend to specialize in either driver's hours records or maintenance. However, the audit is likely to cover all the compliance across the spectrum. You will be asked to produce maintenance records, so your vehicle inspection reports will be scrutinized, and they tend to go in detail on them. So looking into stuff like brake testing, any driver reportable defects, which we talked about in other videos. These are issues that are likely to come up. Very important is to make sure that the reports that you use are up to date, because that will be definitely a red mark against your company if the reports that are used by your maintenance provider are not up to date. Next thing would be the driver walk-around checks and defect reporting procedure. The officers would want to see that their checks are recorded and that defects are reported in the correct manner in line with the company procedure. So if you've got an app or a check sheet, that it is completed, and if there are any defects, then they are being correctly recorded, that the responsible person is notified and it's noted on there, that the action is not also included on the report itself, and that the report is closed off correctly. A lot of people find themselves in trouble because they tend to report a defect, but they do it verbally, or they don't do it at all. They simply just fix the problem, but there's no records for that. So when it comes to investigations or actual audits, then they are unable to produce any evidence for defect rectification. That normally is highlighted as a red flag and as a lack of proper compliance record keeping, which is one of the undertakings of the operator's license. So very important to make sure that this part is actually completed and the drivers know their responsibilities, that the transport managers also know the responsibilities. After that, they are likely to dive into the brake testing regime to see whether you complete the brake tests as a roller brake test, are they laden, unladen. If there are any issues, have you ever had any vehicle on the road that shouldn't be used on the road after the brake test? So that's another big area to focus on. Some officers would dive into the vehicle emissions. Definitely AdBlue record keeping is important, because that shows that your company have been buying AdBlue and actually using them in the vehicles there, because there was some evidence in the past with some operators who were trying to avoid using AdBlue by installing devices that are actually enabling the vehicles to not use AdBlue, and obviously save money, but have a greater impact on the environment. So very important to have records and evidence that your company has got everything in place properly. Next thing they would look at is your planner, your forward planning. How do you plan the vehicle maintenance? You will have to demonstrate that you've got at least 6 months planner that is available to people who are responsible for transport operation. That would need to include your inspections. The frequency of inspections will also be considered. So if you have multiple defects on every inspection and they are driver reportable defects, for example, and you do inspections on 12 weekly, then they are likely to point out that maybe you should consider using or completing inspections more often than that. And also, if your vehicle is older than 12 years old, then they will definitely expect the inspections to be completed on a 6-weekly regime rather than on a longer frequency. Another important subject is VOR procedure. So they will definitely ask you that question. What do you do to ensure that vehicles that have been removed from service are not incidentally used on the road by some driver who was not aware? So demonstrating that the keys are being removed from operation, and also maybe an introduction of a VOR sign at the dashboard to actually communicate to the drivers that this vehicle is out of use and unavailable for them for their operation. The next thing they will look at is the monitoring of the quality monitoring of your operation. So what are the transport managers or the responsible people doing to ensure that the drivers complete their walk-around checks properly? Are there any gate checks? What are your quality measures against your maintenance provider? Are they is there any training? So that normally is a difficult question to answer, because if you're using external provider, they will want to know if you've vetted them. Are they properly trained? Do they know what they're doing in terms of experience? These questions also come up. Then they will move into the procedures for the vehicle recall. So that normally surprises a lot of people, because as an operator you've got also a responsibility to make sure that the vehicles are maintained up to the manufacturer's standards. So if there was any recalls, then they need to be completed, especially if they are safety related. There will be definitely a question on the DVSA report that will point towards that. Then they will move on to the training, so demonstrating that the transport manager has got up-to-date certificate. So obviously they will have a transport manager CPC if you've got standard license, but they will also ask when was the last time they completed any refresher or any periodic training, any continuous professional development, that sort of thing. So these records for those are also important. So even if transport manager attended any conferences, any things like that, it's very good to have records that will demonstrate that this was completed. This will go a long way. So on the flip side, if you've been a transport manager for 20 years and you've done no training whatsoever, or if you are a restricted license holder and you've never done any training at all, then that may be leading to some problems down the line. Moving on to the drivers, again, any toolbox talks that you complete, any initial training, induction, driver assessments. Do they know what to look for in terms of vehicle defects? Do they know about tyre defects? So there are some specific DVSA documents now, or they are in the public domain as well, where you can actually look at the types of defects on the tyres. So communicating that to the drivers is very, very good idea, and then having that as a driver training record is very good position to be in when you've got DVSA audit. So after that, they will move into the load security. So how do you train your drivers? How do you ensure that the loads that you carry are safe and they are not posing any risk to the public? So again, driver training, good practice, health and safety. Are you following the health and safety rules, regulations? So they will want to be happy that the operation that you have is safe. They will also want to know your procedure against bridge strikes, so to ensure that drivers know the vehicle heights that they check, and they also ensure that whenever the height of the vehicle changes, so that will be with the load, with the trailer swap, then obviously the height sticker will be updated, and they will expect that there is a proper procedure in place for the route planning, so the drivers do not actually plan to fail in terms of finding themselves in a situation when they will be approaching a low bridge with the overheight vehicle. For passenger service operators, they will expect to have incident reporting procedure in place, so any issues with the passengers, any accidents, any onboard issues will be also recorded, so you will have to disclose that on the on the visit. Another thing that often surprises operators is the security and counterterrorism. You are expected to have the counterterrorism policy in place, or at least a practice that will prevent the vehicles from being stolen, from unauthorized use. Obviously, in the past, the heavy goods vehicles have been used as a weapon to do a lot of damage, so authorities definitely expect companies to have a security and counterterrorism policy and good practice in place. After that, they will move on to the drivers. They will want to make sure that the driving licenses are checked, that the digicards for the tachos are checked, that the qualification cards for the CPC are always with the drivers when they drive, and then that you've got a procedure in place to ensure that this happens. How do you monitor the expiry dates, and how often you check driving licenses, what you do with people who have points on the driving license. So one of the important things is that the traffic commissioner expects that the company will not tolerate that the drivers have received points on driving license for breaking regulations like mobile phone use, speeding. They expect a company to actually take some formal action against that type of situations. So it's not just a case of, oh yes, we check the driving licenses, preferably every 3 months or more often if there are points on driving license. But the traffic commissioner will expect that if someone receives points on the driving license for speeding, that you will actually take some disciplinary action as well, and possibly even force that person out of the company if they keep on receiving points on the driving license. So staying on the subject of drivers, they will go very deeply into driver training. What sort of documents are they signing for? How do you deliver the training? Is it effective, or are you just simply getting them to sign? They don't even read the memos that you give them. So they may even question some drivers, or they might have done that before, because a lot of visits are happening as a result of a roadside stop. So they would have already questioned the driver on a roadside stop, and then following some shortcomings that they found, they may want to see what's going on at the depot as well. So they may have already that data in place. So if you say, oh yes, our drivers are being trained and everything, and if your driver actually on the roadside said that they didn't have a clue that they had to check a vehicle, then you're not going to have a very consistent record. I mean, that would be quite extreme example, but it does happen as well. So making sure that the drivers actually know what they have to do and they're effectively trained is very important, and also having that backed up with their signatures and some further records is a very good idea. Examples of driver training would include the use of DigiCard, driver's hours. Are they up to date with all the driver's hours regulations? Do they know how to check the vehicle? Do they know how to secure the load? Working at height is quite a good example. So maybe some risk assessments in there. They will also expect the drivers to know about vehicle height, bridge strikes. They will want to know that the drivers have been trained regarding tires and age of tires, for example, what is legal on and what is not in terms of their defects, that they know what is the procedure, how to report a defect and how to get it rectified. They will also expect some declarations to be in place. So definitely working time directive declaration, where the drivers declare that they either just work for one company, for yourself, or that they have multiple employers, and therefore you need to be aware of that so you can calculate their working time directive records properly. You would want to show their driving license declaration, any declarations that the drivers will not drive when they are unfit to drive for whatever reason, that they will have the driving license up to date so that the address is correct, and so on. Then they will move on to the driver's hours records. So you will have to show them your system that you've got in place. They are very likely to request some raw data, which is the files that you took from driver cards and from your vehicles, and actually provide them for analysis on their own system, so they can identify any issues that potentially may be with your company. And after that, they will want to see that you have captured the same data, and that your findings are the same and you're aware of them. So if you have things like missing mileage, driver infringements, that you've got records to actually explain that, and that you have actioned any issues before they've asked for them. So it's very important to run the regular reports on your working time directive, driver infringements, that your driver cards are downloaded on a regular basis, that the vehicles are downloaded on a regular basis. Missing mileage reports, very important to compare that the records from the driver cards and from the vehicles match and there is no unallocated mileage, so people didn't use the vehicle without the card, or that you've got all the data captured from all the driver cards. Lead-in reports, for example, very good idea to have, where drivers are informed or it's highlighted that the drivers actually started driving within a period less than 10 minutes from inserting the card, which indicates that the defects check, or walk around check, was not completed or completed very quickly. So, or maybe they have inserted the card after they've completed the walk around check, which would indicate that the not entire daily records were recorded properly. So providing this kind of reports definitely shows good practice, and that's what you want to achieve. You're also likely to receive questions about the responsible person, like transport manager, how often they engage with their transport compliance, how much time they spend on this, and the overall picture of how the compliance is achieved will also be included in the report. So the report itself is in depth. The subjects I mentioned would normally lead to a couple of more questions below, which you will have to answer and provide evidence of the processes in place. So it's not something that you can simply say, yes, I have got that in place, and then just show one report. No, they will want to see a proper, robust procedure in place that is backed up with the continuous renewal of documents and processes that are happening at your company to ensure compliance is achieved. PSV operators will also have to answer questions about DBS checks, about the treatment of disabled people, about all sorts of procedures related to passengers, to vulnerable passengers, and be prepared to answer this in depth with documented training. So at the end of the whole process, DVSA are likely to provide you with the report, which, if there are any issues to be rectified, then they will simply ask you to do them, and you will have to respond in writing to ensure that you are putting the measures in place to rectify the issues that they've brought up. The possible outcomes of the audit are satisfactory report, which obviously is what you want to have. There may be some verbal points that they will raise with you to give you some encouragement to further improve your compliance, but generally, if they are happy, then that will be just filed on their records, and you will be presented with the report, and that's where you want to be. There may be some minor improvements that they list and request you to write back to them and address them. Once you do that, they will accept them and write back to you that you need to continue doing this, and there may be some follow-up visits after a certain time to ensure that these were implemented. If there are some more concerning visits, more concerning issues presented at the visits, then they may still request that those are addressed, and they may book a further visit or request further audits, which will still kind of keep it between you and DVSA. It's at their discretion at that point. However, if you reach a certain threshold where there is no systems in place, where there is some serious concerning issues, or following the vehicle stop on the roadside, it's apparent to them that their compliance is not being met at your operating center or at your company level, then you are very likely to be reported to Traffic Commissioner. And at that point, you will still have to provide answers to DVSA to ensure them that you are addressing the issues, but their report will also be forwarded to Traffic Commissioner. And at that point, you can expect that Traffic Commissioner will take some regulatory action against your operator license, which means you may be called to public inquiry. At that point, obviously you've been notified that your company has been non-compliant, and you need to address the issues as soon as possible, or simply stop operating vehicles if you are unable to do so, because in DVSA view you are non-compliant, therefore you are posing a threat to the road safety, and that's definitely where you don't want to be as a company. You need to remember that the traffic commissioner might have simply ordered DVSA to complete an audit on your company, in which case they will simply have to send the report regardless of the outcome. So even if it is a perfect report, they will still send it to traffic commissioner because that's what was requested of them. What we also find is that some companies don't like the DVSA coming in on their premises. They feel like this is an intrusion, or and definitely they feel that they make their officers feel that they're unwelcome on site. This is not very good practice because they're ultimately there to implement safety and good compliance. So even if you've got some shortcomings, working with them and they will try to educate you as well. So treating that as an opportunity rather than a nuisance is a very good idea. However, having said that, if you know that you've got DVSA coming, it's a very good idea to get a consultant or experienced transport manager to come on site and actually check your records beforehand so you can present them in the best possible way. The presentation actually is can make a very big difference, because if you present the data in a orderly manner, if it's a smooth report, a smooth demonstration of the processes, then you radiate a good compliance, good practices, and everything seems to be in place. Where on the contrary, if you have to search for documents, they are not in order, not in date order, then it doesn't show a good compliance, even though you may have all the documents in place, but you definitely want to show confidence in your systems and demonstrate that to DVSA officers. So having a consultant actually looking over your data before DVSA come is a very good idea. Hopefully this was insightful. If you have any questions, we have been through multiple DVSA visits, so I have some experience with that, and generally speaking it is normally a positive experience, contrary to a lot of people think. If you work with them, they will definitely support you, and ultimately thinking that road safety is our common goal is a very good way to go. If this was helpful, please give us a like, please subscribe, and if you have any suggestions for further videos, please drop them in comment, or if you have any questions about this video, please drop them in comments as well. We'll be happy to record further videos for you. Thanks very much for watching. My name is Roman. This is a Fleet Planner Compliance video.